Welcome to another episode of Behind the Mic in the SEC. This week, we're going to feature UGA with Atlanta sports reporter Reggie Chapman. He's also one of my mentors. How you doing today, Reggie?
Hey, I'll tell you, I'm doing real well. It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta. All is well. I get to talk to you, so no big deal. I'm off today also, which is really a blessing.
So, tell me about your career. How did you start your journey in sports reporting?
All right, well, like a lot of sports reporters, I started my journey just because I played sports growing up, and I recognized at some point I was like, all right, I'm not going to go to Division One, I'm not going to be a professional athlete in whatever sport because I played everything: football, baseball, basketball, soccer. But I was trying to figure out a way to stay close to the game, and there was multiple different ways of how we kind of did it. But um, one of the biggest things initially, I just wanted to be like a team doctor or like a physician. I want to be like taping up people's ankles and stuff like that because all I really wanted to do, honestly, was like wear the cool polos, be able to fly with the team, and like hang out with the guys. And like I'm basically on the team, but like I don't have to do all the running, which is like kind of like nice, you know what I mean? But I don't know, Brie, how, like, I'm trying to remember what year it was, but there was a Final Four like a long time ago. I don't remember what year it was. Do you know who Kevin Ware is? Is that
Yeah,
name?
yeah, I know the name.
Dude, shin snapped in half at the Final Four, and I said, "Hey, I don't want to have to save a man's leg. Like it just he was closing out on a regular three. I guess he had shin splints over time, and like he just landed super regularly, and his shin just like snapped through his leg. And I said, I don't know, like
Mm-mm.
yeah, no,
Mm-mm.
maybe look it up. You gotta change my life. I was
I'm
like,
good. I'm good. No, that's
I
gross.
just it was from there. I was like, I don't know if like I don't want to be the guy to save a man's leg. Like, let's say I didn't pay attention to class that day, right? You know what I'm saying? On TV, I could, if I don't know something, I could finesse it, right? Like, there's no finessing a man's leg like on the ground, right? You know what I mean? It's snapped in half. They're like, Reggie, fix this. And if I don't know what to do, who am I going to look towards, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I decided then, and based on how I was doing in my biology class at the time, that maybe the whole team doctor kinesiology route's not for me. But um, I always liked editing video. I always consider myself kind of a creative person. I liked making videos. I always liked making the video projects in class when it was an available option because it was fun and it felt easy for me. And I don't know. At the end of high school, I taught myself how to edit. I did a journalism class, and then I went to LSU where I was at Tigers V for 4 years. Um, I did sports and entertainment and news, and I did everything there. Um, and then after that, I decided to go into this field professionally. I worked at WBRZ in Baton Rouge for 3 years. Before getting a job here in Atlanta, I've been here for about a year and 7 or 8 months. So it's been a pretty good ride so far.
And is sports reporting like something you always knew you wanted to do, like in the back of your head?
I think for a long time it was always kind of an option, right? Like I said, I thought maybe the kinesiology route might be the wave, but I think really I can remember thinking back to like a long time ago. There's a man named Stuart Scott. He was a Sports Center anchor years ago. He passed away from cancer some years back now, but I remember watching him growing up and thinking like, wow, there's a African American male on TV doing Sports Center. He looks and he sounds like me. He speaks like how I do, like when I'm just with my buddies and my friends. But he's on the biggest possible stage in television, in sports television. So he inspired me, and he's inspired a bunch of other people that are in my field that look and sound like me to do this job. And so I always thought it was kind of an option. And I've always told myself, there's something I really want, like I go after it, and we've gotten pretty far so far.
So you covered LSU, you covered UGA. SEC is not something that's new to you. What do you enjoy about covering UGA? And also, what did you enjoy covering about LSU?
I'll start with LSU. One, it's my alma mater, so I mean that was always a lot of fun, just strictly based off the fact that I had a real interest in knowing how they did. Right, it didn't really feel like work because at the end of the day, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the deal is with this team because like one, I need to know it for my job and understand it, but two, I had a real interest in it because like I cared how my team did. That's what all me and my friends talked about. It was really the community, right? And so especially because I was doing it for um, 4 years in college, and then being able to do it out of college was really nice. Um, and I guess that was a lot of fun. So that was just great because it was alma mater. And then I guess covering Georgia is a lot of fun too because it's similar. These jobs that I had in Baton Rouge and my job here in Atlanta is so similar because we've got a major college football program at LSU and then a major college football program here at Georgia, right? We cover an NFC South team. It's at for the Saints, and then here I'm covering the Falcons, right? I mean, college baseball, we got real baseball here.
There's not
I
many
mean, the
cities in the
NBA,
country you can do that.
correct, and it's really really cool knowing that I got to do all that in college, and now I get to do it here. So yeah, no, covering Georgia is a lot of fun, just because similar vibes to that 2019 LSU team where they just were going to beat anybody, and it didn't really matter who was in their way. Um, Last year's Georgia team felt like that. Like I didn't think anybody would really beat them until they did get beat in the SEC championship game. But I was like, look, if they get another shot at it, they're going to win. And then this year, same deal. Like there were some games that maybe I thought they'd lose, but you always felt like they were going to be number one or number two, and they were going to make the college football playoff regardless. You know what I mean? So it's been a really good ride covering both these teams, and it's cool seeing a side of the SEC that I never really got to cover while I was at LSU. I mean, I had never been to South Carolina. Like a lot of these SEC East schools, like Tennessee, I had never really covered or seen. I'd never been to their campuses, but now I can say I have, and I can understand how both sides of the totem pole kind of move. And I'll say this: I recognize that the SEC West is just way better football than the SECs. Georgia's walking through a cakewalk schedule every single year and getting away with it, where LSU or Georgia have to go up against each other and Auburn, and it's just Kentucky's not moving the needle for me. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit different.
So I know you've covered other conferences like in Georgia Tech, Southern, different conferences. What sets the SEC apart from every other conference, and what do you enjoy about covering the SEC?
I think the SEC is different just based off the fact that people really, really, really care. Not to say that nobody really cares in the SWAC or the ACC, right? Like you go to one Southern game, like it's very clear that these people care a lot about their sport and their team. The stands are packed. I mean, the tailgating is incredible, and it rivals LSU's. And like it's the same level of just commitment to their team, right? ACC is a little bit different. Like it's funny because I didn't really recognize the ACC as a real conference until I got here. Maybe that's just me being an SEC homer, but I never really did. But once I got here, started covering, I recognized like no, people do care about this. Like this is a conference that like has some real good talent, and there's some real good teams, especially in the basketball route as well. Like I mean, Miami's the Final Four now, which is hilarious because Georgia Tech basketball beat them. They were terrible this year. Their coach got fired, but they beat Miami. Miami's the Final Four. So like I don't know, I would say covering the SEC is just different because it's all of those things. There's the care for it, but it's just on I guess, a bigger scale, right? I mean, there's not a lot of places that are fitting in stadiums of 102,000 people, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? In this middle of like a lot of these SEC schools are in middle of nowhere towns at the end of the day. Like, what are you going to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for other than to go see Alabama football play, right? And you're putting 102,000 people in those stands in a middle of nowhere town. I mean, Baton Rouge is the capital, but at the end of the day, like New Orleans is the big city in Louisiana, right? But you're putting 102,000 people. Athens, Georgia's an hour away from Atlanta, which is a major city, but they're putting 92, 93, 94,000 people in there, where Georgia Tech's only fitting in, I don't know, their stadium's smaller and they're not packing it out. So they're only maybe having maybe 45, 50,000. You know what I mean? It's the amount that people care is the difference in the SEC.
And what do you like specifically about Georgia, about getting to cover UGA, other than the fact they're just good, but like about the environment, about the team itself? I mean, and not even just football and other sports too. Like, what do you enjoy getting to cover about Georgia?
I think Georgia's fun just because it like you said, the biggest part about it is the fact that like they're good. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of fun covering a team that matters, right? That has some national relevance, has a coach that people care about. You know what I mean? Has a fan base that people really care what you have to say or the content that you give them. So I think really that's the biggest aspect of it, honestly. But I will say, like, I do think that um, like I said, it's I mentioned earlier, but it's just the difference of covering it from a different way, right? You know what I mean? Like the SEC is just a different animal, right? Like it's a different group of players, a different group of teams, and I think it's also just a different challenge, knowing that, like, I don't know, hypothetically, like LSU, you go to LSU, there's gonna be every year there's gonna be some superstar guy that's gonna probably go top 10 in the draft, like on offense, or maybe like a high level DB that's gonna go really high on draft, and like these names, you got superstar players. Where Georgia's a little bit different, where like they're a nationally relevant team, right? But a lot of their big names, Stetson Bennett, right, is not going to be a top 10 first round, maybe even third, fourth round pick, right? It's a little different. They have no real like star power. which feels weird for a team that's gone back to back in national championship seasons, right? So a lot of their biggest names are on defense or on the defensive line. Like there's no, it's always that, you know what I mean, versus like superstar offensive players that make big names for themselves. So I think that's really the difference. It's covering a team. It's a challenge because you have to learn about the team and the players and how it works and the coaching. And of course, it's Kirby Smart who comes from the Nick Saban system where he's not giving you a lot at the end of the day. You don't get to see practice, right? It's a lot of just reading up and trying to understand like what each player does and understand a little bit more about the game, versus knowing, hey, Joe Burrow's just going to lead him to another freaking win.
Yeah. So other than football, because I know you're a football guy, what's your favorite sport to cover, or favorite sport you have covered in your career?
Um, I love college baseball a lot.
You see?
Um, I really, really like college baseball. And the funniest thing about college baseball, or like my connection to college baseball, is like I didn't watch like until like the second semester of my senior year. I didn't watch like any college baseball, right? Like I didn't. It wasn't until my second semester where I was like, oh, there's LSU is one of the biggest, baddest college baseball programs in college baseball history, and I just had no clue. Right, it's right down the street. I mean, I did not see Alex Bregman play one time, and I was at school at the same time as he was, at least for a year. Maybe it
I'm
was
about to
two
say
years.
you're that old.
Um, I think it was just my freshman. Is that accurate? It might have just been my freshman year, if my math is correct. But regardless, I just had no clue, right? You know what I mean? I just didn't realize it. And so, but the funny enough, like I ended up getting my job at WBRZ because like I was covering some baseball stuff and I ran into my next boss, Michael Cobble, who, you know what I'm saying, the process of it's a convoluted process how I got the job. But I remember having a conversation with him and he was figuring out what my how I kind of was, what my interest was in. And um it's because I was covering a college baseball game. And I remember shadowing for that job. I went and shot a college baseball game for him. I mean, he shot the first couple innings and they said, Red, just shoot the game with Mike Gaither here, see how you do, da 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 da. Well, LSU baseball ended up hitting like 3 or 4 home runs, and he needed to use all those highlights, and he had to use my highlights because I shot them and I shot them well. So it was a crazy test. He had to use those highlights, and they made the show, and he's like, dude, this is the first time I've ever had an intern um, use their stuff on TV, right? And that created a very so I got a real connection with college baseball because I think it's really cool. People care about it at LSU. I mean, it's not something that is a big, big, big deal here in Georgia, but I think it's also based off of what you cover, right? Like I do a really good job of making sure that we talk about Georgia Tech baseball because it's right down the street. You know what I'm saying? They're playing Friday, Saturday, Sundays, of course. Like they're a big time ACC program. They're a ranked program. They hit a lot of home runs. And it's a lot of fun. So like I think a lot of what this is understanding like what you enjoy. And I can tell that regardless of like the baseball is good or bad, I like college baseball a lot.
What would you say is the biggest story or biggest accomplishment that you've ever done in your career that you're just like really proud of?
It's funny. I think that this has kind of shifted and changed over the last couple of years. I think before I got my job in Atlanta, my biggest moment of my career was when I was actually in Atlanta the first time, that 2019 LSU year where I was covering LSU versus Georgia. Um, my boss, me and Mike Gaither got sent out here. Not Mike Gaither. Matt Trent at the time was the weekend guy. We got sent out to Atlanta. It was my first time in Atlanta, right? Like actually being here. I remember thinking, wow, this is a really cool city. You know what I'm saying? I'd really like to like work here potentially, right? But maybe way, way, way down the line, right? And I remember you got one credential to be able to shoot the game, and then one person was in the press box. I'm much younger than Matt Trent. But I knew I could shoot my ass off. And my boss saw that and said, hey, I'm trusting you to shoot this game. You know what I'm saying? I want you to be the one that shoots it. And I was like, okay, hey, no big deal. So, I mean, that was a really cool moment because I'm covering my alma mater in Atlanta. Like, this is the biggest possible game that you're allowed to shoot. You know what I mean? Before the TV rights get taken over when they get into the college football playoff for these bowl games. Um, and I remember just being on that field and thinking like this is a really really special moment, like being in the stadium in this environment. That was, and I shot the game well too, and so I think that was one of the proudest moments of my career. But um, crazy enough, a year and a half later, I ended up getting a job here, and I'd say like I think maybe one of the coolest moments was this last national championship run where I'm on the field after they won their second national championship game. We're doing a live stream. You know what I mean? It's running, and running, and we're just grabbing players and interviewing people on the field and running and gunning and getting shots. And I'm grabbing the camera, and then my producer's got a camera in her hand, and then Maria, my coworker, and her photog, Chris, so they're running around and we're doing all this and that on this live show that's being streamed back to the station. And I'm just ad libbing and asking questions and finding players. And I'd say that was a really cool moment for me because I don't know if I could have been able to done it the year before with knowing what I had knowing at the time. So
How do you handle
I think
all
those are my
that?
two biggest.
How do you handle all that? Being at such a high level, being in Atlanta, covering the SEC and a national championship, like the stakes are high, and I'm sure the pressure is too. How do you calm yourself down and be able to do that so effortlessly? Because you make it look easy to me.
Well, that means a lot to me. And I would say, and I've told you this before, Brie, I think the biggest aspect of like what I do to make sure that I'm prepared is the preparation, whether it's making sure that I've read enough or I'm constantly like, maybe I'm reading articles in the Athletic or the AJC or what I'm saying, UGAsports.com, right? Knowing what's going on, right? Like listening to the radio when in my car, like not just listening to music all the time, paying attention to the what's being said in the city, what kind of the pulse is, so that way when people like maybe like Paul Feinbaum at the last minute's like, hey, I want you to be on my show, I can, and he asks, hey, what is the feeling with this program around the city? I can say that based on what my point of view is and what also like the point of view is of like what the people around me. So I think it's all about preparation. It's also about reps. It's all about practicing. I think it's also just experiencing it too. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like this last national championship was my third national championship that I've covered in my almost almost 5 year career. You know what I mean? And so I've seen enough, and I've also put myself in positions in the past, whether I had done this or not, to see what it's like, making sure I'm paying attention, asking questions. Like if I'm watching on TV, I know what it's supposed to look like, right? It's all about the prep work and understanding and being present in your current situation. And I think it's helped me and brought me a long way.
And what would you say is your ultimate career goal? If you could dream up the perfect job for your career that you'd want to do forever and never leave, what would that be?
I don't know, man. I think it's funny because I think my opinion on that has kind of changed. I think growing up, I was like Sports Center, Sports Center, Sports Center, Sports Center. I want to be at Sports Center. I do not care what happens. I don't know what to care up to do. Like I want to be on Sports Center, whatever. The biggest, baddest stage um for sports journalism, just like Stuart Scott, right? And I think that like it's funny because as you kind of grow in your career, you recognize what's important to you and what's not really important to you, right? Like, and this is gonna sound like a cop out answer, but like it's really true. The only thing I really, really care about is being happy. You know what I mean? Like being happy in the space that I'm in, right? Like the goal is always to get better and be a better shooter and a better producer and a better writer and a better storyteller, right? And just being good at that aspect of it. But I want to be in a city where or a job where I'm happy. Because coming out of college, it was like, all right, or like going through college, I was like, I don't care where I gotta go, I will go to the middle of nowhere, like blah 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 blah, right? And I've been super blessed that like my first job out of school was in Baton Rouge. I was living in my same college apartment, making actual money. So I was just like a rich college kid for like a couple of years, which was really nice. Like, and I loved Baton Rouge. So like I really enjoyed being there. And then like now I really enjoy being in Atlanta and covering the things I cover, things that matter. You know what I mean? And like all I care about is being in a city where like it feels like home, where I can be happy, where I'm covering things that matter. And whether that's on the local, the regional, or the national stage, that is the most important thing for me.
And I'm getting ready to graduate soon. And I know I come to you for advice all the time, but maybe something you haven't told me yet. Just advice for somebody coming right out of school looking for their first job.
Um, I think I think to put it simply, I think the option, but I think I would just say keep your options open, right? And that's on the low end and on the high end, right? Um, I think at the end of the day, like everybody's path and journey is different. You know what I mean? And like I think that a lot of people get in trouble with being too rigid with what they want to do. You know what I mean? Being too rigid with maybe the directions they want to handle because they have this idea of what this is supposed to look like. When in reality, the plan's already the plan, and you just have to figure out how to get there. You know what I mean? And you make the right decisions along the process. So I think my idea is like, I think what I'm saying is like on the low end, don't be afraid to go to like a small market. And like I've told you in the past, like maybe like I don't think necessarily the numbers matter, right? And maybe I missaid this to you before. Like maybe it's people I don't want to be in the top 100 market, right? I think that like at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about the number; it's all about the fit, right? Because there's a lot of really like cities that I do not want to live in, that were maybe higher where I was in Baton Rouge, or like maybe if I'm somewhere like that, or maybe there's cities that are top or outside of the top 100 that are better sports cities or like livable cities than like that are bigger cities that are in the top 100, right? So I think that people have this idea of cutting off themselves from certain ideas in certain places. I think it's important that you leave your options open and really weigh everything. And I think, and that's on the low end. And on the high end, I think also don't limit yourself either, because I told myself, yeah, I have high goals and aspirations for myself. I told myself, hey, like at the time I was 22 when I was out here the first time in 2019. Is that math right? I don't know. And I remember thinking like this would be a really cool city to be in, right? I'd love to be in a city like Atlanta, top 10 market in the country by age 29, 28, 29, or 30. I got out here at age 24. And I mean, it's been a hell of a ride. And um, I think it's just knowing that, what's supposed to happen is going to happen as long as you put the work in, you see what's kind of going on. And also remember that it only really takes like one view, right? Sometimes maybe in this field, we're run on, especially in the social media age, we're run on likes and view count and um, getting that kind of like feeling of like, all right, a lot of people are watching my stuff, right? When in reality, all it really takes is like one person to view it, whether it's like, one person that's seeing a job, or like one person down the line, or maybe one person on social media, or maybe somebody that you're inspiring that's coming behind you that's seen your work and is like, I could do that, right? Staying grounded, staying humble in that environment. And that's kind of three things, but that's kind of the point I'm making here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Reggie. Reggie's from 11 Alive News in Atlanta. He covers UGA. Thank you for joining us. And we will have an interview with Alabama next week on Behind the Mic in the SEC. Thanks so much, Reggie.
Very welcome.